Hi, this is Zach Meir from DirectorsTalk, and I'm speaking with Dennis Melka, who is CEO at United Cacao. How are you today, Dennis?
Very good. Thanks for having me back online. Appreciate it.
Right, we're going through some questions here, interesting ones. CNN, through their Freedom Project, has documented that very high percentages of cocoa, if that's the right pronunciations, cacao, are used globally and are in fact produced with child labour and slavery from West Africa. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a horrific conditions on the ground in West Africa where the vast majority of cacao consumed globally comes from. You know, West Africa is the world's dominant supplier of cacao. You're talking about 80% of the world's beans, which are supporting $110 billion of annual confectionery sales, are being sourced from West Africa. And as documented by CNN and many other publications, there's a huge element of child labor and in many cases slavery used to produce those beans. So it's something where I think obviously the industry needs to change. Consumers want ethically produced beans, and I think that's very much where United Cacao steps in. You know, if you look at the workers at our estate, every worker is paid by direct deposit to their bank accounts. We help them set up bank accounts if they don't have them. Every employee has Ministry of Labor approved contracts, and we actually have a waiting list of workers that want to join us. We make no deductions from the worker's salary. In fact, we provide room, board, and accommodation on site free of charge. So it's I think that the standard really for large scale ethically produced cacao, and that's where United Cacao is leading the way.
So that's one of your pillars in terms of your business model, to sort of change the let's say the ethics of the business.
Absolutely, and I think this is where there's a big opportunity because that's what the consumers consuming chocolate, so the people consuming that $110 billion a year of global confectionery sales want to know that child labor and slavery was not used in the production of that product. So I think here we're providing a very clear platform. Again, ethically produced, our laborers are all under documented contracts approved by the Ministry of Labor. Workers are paid directly by electronic payment to their bank accounts. So I think this really, again, sets the standard for large-scale cultivation of cacao.
Right. Another bullet to be dodged in terms of your industry is regarding deforestation and rainforest destruction, rather, presumably in order to grow your raw materials. How does your company differ from the rest in this area?
Well, I'd first like to talk about the whole industry because I think that's an accusation that's ballied around by a lot of these very radical NGO groups, and unequivocally in defense of the industry, it's absolutely not the case. In fact, the plantation industry has the smallest environmental footprint, and I'll answer the question on a couple layers. One, at a societal level and how we have responsibility to feed people. Number two, from a very practical level on the ground. And number three, from a sovereign level. So first, from a societal level, I think everybody would agree who would listen to this program that we as businessmen and managers and investors have a responsibility to feed the world. People are hungry, they need to be fed. And so what is the right thing to do? Do we use inefficient crops in inefficient areas to try and produce that food? Or do we use efficient crops in efficient areas to produce the food and have the smallest environmental footprint? And so if you look at the plantation industry, and again, predominantly it's palm oil, but also rubber and sugar cane and cacao fits into that as well. You can have a choice on where to grow this crop. And so let's look at the case of palm oil. 1 hectare of palm oil produced in, say, Peru or Southeast Asia would produce 6 to 7 tons of oil per hectare. Compare that with European or American canola, soya, or rapeseed, which will produce half a ton of oil per hectare. So here you can see the efficiency of the palm oil tree grown in a tropical area is 7 to 10 times that of a competing Western row crop. So, in fact, the environmental footprint of palm oil has a fraction of that of Western agriculture. So of course, then it has the smallest environmental footprint. And the same can be said for cacao. Is it better to grow 1 hectare of cacao in Peru or Ecuador, where you can get 2.5, 3 tons of cacao per hectare because of the excellent growing condition? Or do you produce half a ton of cacao in West Africa, where there's suboptimal rainfall, suboptimal growing conditions, labor issues? So is it better to plant 6 hectares in West Africa or 1 hectare in Latin America? So I think it's the plantation industry actually reduces environmental impact because it's a highly efficient form of agriculture. And it's for this reason that, if you look predominantly in Asia, you have an industry which is over 80 publicly traded companies. You're talking $100 billion of market capitalization. And that market capitalization exists because it's a profitable crop, because it's an efficient crops grown in efficient areas. So again, on the food point of view, I think it's essential to be efficient as a society. And that's what plantations do. They produce the highest amount of food or flavorings in the smallest environmental impact. The next point is very much a practical point. And again, all these really radical NGO groups will say, oh my goodness, deforestation and rainforest. I think it's important to note that by the time the plantation companies actually get to the land, that land has been logged or clear-cut of all tropical hardwoods. It's been not a rainforest, it's a secondary forest, it's a highly degraded area. So I think there's a confusion about actually what rainforest is. And so there's obviously legal and illegal logging, and that impacts the land. And for this reason, governments have allocated degraded land and secondary vegetation land for purposes of agriculture, for precisely the reason that it's degraded, that it should be used for better purposes for society. And so again, unequivocally, by the time the plantation companies get to the land, this land has been logged and degraded very significantly before it's been converted to agriculture. Which brings us really to the next point about sovereign rights and the right of people to work, the right of food security of nations, and the right of nations to determine what they should do with their land. And I think, when you look at some of the radical behavior of these NGOs, it really is almost a neo-colonialist attitude that they take to some of these countries. And so, again, look at the case of Peru. Here you have a country that, documented by the government, has over 70 million hectares of forested land, of which 20 million hectares is designated as degraded. And you have a palm oil industry which is 60,000 hectares. You have a cacao industry which is maybe 100,000 hectares. Here you have a country importing food to meet the needs of its population. So it's really fascinating how you see some of these claims bandied about by environmental groups saying about deforestation. I mean, it really is, I think, a nation's sovereign right to determine how they develop their land, particularly when they have poverty that needs to be addressed. And again, plantations are the best form of creating jobs in very rural areas where there are no economic employment opportunities. So I think when I look at this and take a step back, I look at these NGO arguments, and frankly, they're intellectually weak. They're built on a lot of emotion, and really they have no concern for the people on the ground that are really trying to escape crushing poverty, or in many cases have narco-trafficking around them. So I think it's something where it's important that people take a step back, look at the reality of the situation on the ground, and really promote free trade and free agriculture, which is where these countries are globally competitive.
Right. I just want to finish off with your thoughts on the plantation business as a whole. Obviously, you're talking about it in general terms. How does United Cacao fit into the global marketplace in terms of this?
Well, yeah, it's industry that's been around for almost 100 years. I mean, there's been commercial cultivation in Southeast Asia since 1912. Some of these companies are enormous businesses. You're talking $5, $10, $20 billion market capitalizations. And you see them growing around the world. They're in West Africa. They're in processing in Europe and America. And I think the theme here is that they will continue to expand, and they will continue to get bigger. You see, many of these companies are obviously very large in palm oil, but they do have rubber. They have sugar cane. Historically, they were involved in cacao. And it's something where you see continual M&A. I mean, if you look at the London Exchange, our prior business, Asian Plantations, was sold to a large Asian player. Recently, Sime Darby completed the plus £1 billion acquisition of New Britain Palm Oil, which again was traded in London. So I think the theme of consolidation and growth in the industry is going to continue. It has been going on for 100 years, and it will continue because it's the most efficient way that humans can produce the food and flavorings that are needed for consumption around the world.
Dennis Melka, CEO at United Cacao, thank you very much for speaking with Directors Talk today.
Thanks again.